All right, I'll give it one more shot, and I will try my best not to get bogged down in details this time. This is a functional model of the human brain at a level capable of illustrating what PTSD is. But PTSD does not originate in the human brain. It is in the reptile brain, which is modeled here. In this movie, I will show that the memory of the traumatic event is not burned in, as psychiatrists theorize, but results from the fix to a fundamental logic error. So if you are ready, here we go. This part of the model analyzes the nerves to create patterns for input. This part receives instructions from the brain on how to move the muscles. These elements enable the brain to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, using information stored in the anticipation table. This table also handles instinctive reactions and learning later in life. It learns through a process of repetition known to scientists as Pavlov's conditioned response. However, generations of school children will know this process as memorization. To operate properly, the model must stop using this table periodically to search for repeated patterns. Thus, the model needs to go to sleep. To test the changes made while sleeping, a source of patterns is required. These come from the dream machine. The brain analyzes the results to ensure no errors have been created. This buffer stores patterns while previous patterns are being processed. In the model, emotions hold a state. Just like the body will hold a state such as hunger, the brain needs to hold states internally to enable it to function properly. One such state is fear. Without fear, an animal would only run away from a predator while it could detect it. By holding a state, the animal will run for as long as it is afraid. The model also has memory to store information for later use. This is the engine that drives the brain. This engine works on a simple principle. It does what it did the last time the patterns were encountered. The simplest implementation of that concept is a table that holds patterns from the nerves with matching responses for the muscles. This concept helps to understand phobias. If someone pops a balloon in the face of a baby, the child will associate balloons with a traumatic event. The natural reaction to that is the fight or flight response. Later in life, every time a balloon is encountered, the brain will respond with a fight or flight response. It is often stated that phobias do not need to make sense, and the model illustrates this. There is no rationale to the phobia. It is simply a matching of a pattern with a response. At this point, it is worth acknowledging the work of Sigmund Freud. His psychoanalysis was an excellent tool in determining the nature of the engine that drives the brain. Using this method, he was able to determine the nature of the pattern response table. If one imagines this table as a phone book, one can see the problems associated with this technique. A phone book uses the name for the input pattern and the phone number for the output response. The larger the phone book, the longer it will take to find the number. Thus, one is confronted with a problem. Should the table be large and slow, or small and fast? Nature answers this question with an elegant solution. The table holds only the combinations required to survive. To determine what these are, the table is opened during a short period of learning in one's youth. Children watch adults and mimic their behavior since they do not know how to respond. At some point, however, the number of new patterns falls off dramatically. A scientist may seek to hold the table open indefinitely to allow the animal to learn quickly for the rest of its life. But life does not seek knowledge. Life seeks to survive, and this table system can operate much faster if the table is closed off. Once closed off, the system will perform maintenance on only one table, which reduces the amount of sleep required. It also enables neat tricks like using the row numbers instead of patterns in long-term memory. This makes more efficient use of memory space at the expense of not having long-term memory when one is young. So the brain has a period of learning in one's youth where new pattern response combinations are added. After that, it just uses what it's got, and therein lays the problem. The table was closed off on the assumption that if one has survived to that point, one can survive forever. But that assumption has a fundamental logic error, for it assumes the animal has encountered every possible threat to its existence before the table is closed off. What happens if it meets a predator after that? Let's say that an animal was never attacked by a lion when it was young. It never learned to associate the furry animal with danger. Then one day it detects a lion. Since it is no threat, the animal does not run away until it is attacked. Once it is attacked, the instinctive fight or flight response is triggered. Now the animal has a serious problem. Every time it meets a furry animal, it will identify it as no threat and will wait until it is attacked before the fight or flight response is triggered. Now, eventually the conditioned response will form a link between the furry animal and the fight or flight response, but the odds of surviving that are somewhere between nil and none. Of course, this little problem could easily be solved if the memory of the attack were cycled through the brain repeatedly. Then the conditioned response would link the furry animal with the fight or flight response. And that is why the memory is so pervasive in those suffering from PTSD. The encounter is being relived so the brain can condition a response to the traumatic event. When the process is complete, the animal will respond with fight or flight whenever the furry animal is encountered, just as Pavlov's dog would salivate when it heard a bell ring. If a pilot endures PTSD after a traumatic event, the conditioning response will change the pilot's response to being in a cockpit. It will associate being in a cockpit with a traumatic event, preventing the pilot from flying again, and thereby keeping the pilot safe from the danger of flight. It also protects soldiers from the treacherous occupation of warfare, or drivers and passengers from the hazards on the highways. That is its purpose. Now, when this process is triggered, the assumption made is that there is an unknown predator around. Until the conditioning process is finished, the animal is in danger. The safest thing the animal can do is hide somewhere. This is why humans going through PTSD exhibit antisocial behavior, and it is the reason why humans have a problem with PTSD. If you put a reptile in a box, give it food and water, it will live its life completely content. But if you put a human in a box with food and water, the human will go insane. Why? Because the conscience destabilizes the brain. There is a good reason why it does that, but the discussion goes beyond the scope of this simple explanation. Suffice it to say that PTSD drives humans into antisocial behaviors which, even in well-adjusted humans, will induce insanity. The conscience can generate so much stress that it is possible to trigger the PTSD response when there is no threat. That is why PTSD can start long after the traumatic event. If the conscious interferes with the conditioning process, it will prevent the process from completing. Then the memory will cycle through indefinitely. So, to summarize, PTSD is the method the subconscious uses to adapt to new threats later in life. Humans have problems with it because the conscious destabilizes the brain. Then what can be done about it? To answer that, one must understand that PTSD exists in two parts. The first part is the conditioning phase, when the memory cycles through. The brain is not remembering the event, it is actually reliving it. If these units lose track of what is the memory and what is reality, the memory will be treated as reality. This is known as a flashback. Treating this part involves keeping the conscious busy while the process completes. Some people try yoga, while others find Jesus. Still others write about it. My only recommendation is to use the method that works for you. At an absolute minimum, you should attend group therapy sessions to learn from others how to deal with PTSD. Once the conditioning process is done, the second part of PTSD is the new phobia that has been left. This can be treated in the same manner as any phobia. And with that, my explanation is complete. I hope you understand what PTSD is now.